Nicola Sturgeon made history in November 2014 when she was sworn in as the first female First Minister of Scotland. And today, during a period of time that none of us thought we'd ever have to live through, she joins us on Central FM. Nicola Sturgeon, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, I want to get through as many listener questions as we possibly can. Now, you're not long out of yet another government briefing. Can I just ask first, though, how do you muster up the energy to do that every day? It must be incredibly draining.
Yeah, I mean, look, standing up for an hour, given often very difficult news and answering questions, yeah, it takes physical energy as well as mental energy. But, you know, every day right now, I remind myself that no matter how tough my job is right now, and it is, I'm not trying to suggest otherwise, it's nothing compared to the jobs of people who are working to care for those with coronavirus or keep the country going in lots of different ways. So I think in that respect, I'm relatively fortunate. But, you know, we're all in the Scottish Government working as hard as possible. I've also got an incredible team behind me, making sure that we are doing everything we can to keep the country as safe as possible in what, of course, is a completely unprecedented time for most of us.
Well, here's something I was going to ask myself, First Minister, but I'm going to let Amy do the honours. Here she is.
Hi, I'm Amy from Dunblane. Nicola, I wanted to ask, how are you? You've got a job to do as well as a family, and you've probably not had a minute's peace since it's all kicked off. So I just wanted to check you're all right.
Thank you for asking, Amy. Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I think like everybody else right now, struggling at times with the, you know, really big changes to our lives, missing my mum and dad and my sister and my niece and nephews a little bit, because obviously it's a while now since I've seen them. But yeah, just like everybody is getting on with it, trying to take each day as it comes and remember that we're all going to feel up and down at the moment, and it's okay to do that. Try and not always succeeding to get some exercise now and again, and just trying to make sure that, as I said a moment ago, I am taking each day as it comes. There's, you know, everything that we're dealing with right now is monumental, and I think the thing I find hardest in a public sense doing these briefings every day is given the reports about the numbers of people dying, I'm always really conscious that it would be too easy just to think of that as numbers and become a little bit inured to it, and I don't want ever to do that. So I always remind myself that these are people, and take the opportunity to remind everybody else that behind every one of these statistics is a real person. So I think that in terms of what I do publicly at these briefings is probably the most difficult aspect of it.
Okay, after watching your briefing at lunchtime, it looks almost certain that lockdown is going to continue. Here's Rhys with a question about mental health.
Hi, First Minister. My name is Rhys Perry from Falkirk. My question to yourself is regarding mental health. As a sufferer of anxiety and depression, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to access support within my local area. What's your government doing to help support people like myself throughout the pandemic? But also, more to the point, what are you going to do to prioritise mental health when we do come out the other side of this pandemic? And how are you going to prevent it becoming a massive issue in Scotland, which I do believe it will be in these coming months, if not years?
Well, thanks for your question, Rhys, and I'll maybe give a bit of detail in a moment, but more generally, let me say we're acutely aware of the impact right now on people's mental health. This is a risk to our physical health, the virus, but how we're having to deal with the virus also creates challenges for our physical health, because we've had to postpone some procedures in the NHS, but it's taken a big toll on people's mental health and sense of well-being when you're stuck in the house all day, particularly for people who are perhaps on their own and can't, you know, access a garden. This is really difficult, so we're very aware of that, and it's one of the reasons why I want to try and get us back to some kind of normality as quickly as it's safe to do so. And along the way, thinking about, you know, whether we can allow people to go outside into the open air a bit more than we do just now, because we know that can be good for mental health. In terms of what we're doing to provide support, we've at an earlier stage of dealing with this crisis, we announced additional funding for some of the helplines that are available to help people with mental health issues. Breathing Space, for example, which is the line that NHS 24 uses. We also extended funding to extend what's called distress brief interventions, where people can get access to a counsellor to talk through some of the issues that they're dealing with. These are short-term issues, but we know that, as you rightly say, Rhys, there's likely to be quite a long-term implication of what we're dealing with right now. So as we come out of the immediate crisis, as we think about how we get everything back on track, making sure that mental health services are at the very heart of that is going to be one of the big priorities that we seek to address.
Okay, thanks, First Minister, and thanks, Rhys. Now, in a break from the rest of the UK, we're being advised in Scotland to wear face coverings in some public places. In what other ways, First Minister, might the Scottish Government's strategy differ in post-lockdown UK, such as you've already hinted, perhaps setting a different date for the reopening of schools?
I'm not saying for certain it will differ, because that's not really the perspective I come at it from. Really all I'm interested in is what best equips us to suppress the virus and stop it taking lives and infecting people. So if we have to do things differently for that reason, we'll do it. But if that's not the case, then we'll continue to align our policy with the rest of the UK, which we by and large have done so far, although some things we've announced a little bit earlier, including face coverings, which I would expect the whole UK will follow. Boris Johnson indicated that just a few days ago. So I don't think there's a huge difference at the moment, but as I say, it's really important we follow the evidence. Scotland had its first case later than the rest of the UK, so we're at a slightly different stage of what's called the infection curve. So it might be necessary to do things at a different pace in order to make sure that we're not easing up prematurely if the rest of the UK took decisions to start lifting elements of the lockdown. But these are hypotheticals at the moment. They continue to be driven very much by the evidence. There's some practical issues as well. I mean, if you take schools, for example, obviously our school terms are different. Summer holidays in Scotland start earlier than they do in England, and schools go back earlier than they do in England. So some of these practical issues may have an impact on some of the phasing that we undertake to try to get back to some kind of normality.
Would a potential double message, though, there not end up perhaps confusing people in Scotland?
That is one of the factors we've got to take into account. I mean, I've been pretty clear where it is possible. I think the more consistency and alignment as we can have, the better, because it is easier to get across a message in that way than it is by trying to give different messages to people depending on where they live in the country. But you know, the other side of that is we can't be driven so much by that we end up taking the wrong decisions. So, you know, we've got to be driven by the evidence here. We know we're suppressing this virus. We know we've got a bit of work yet to do to get it to the low level we need it to be at. And that might not happen at exactly the same time in every single part of the UK. It may not even, and I don't want to say hairs running here, I'm just sort of using this as an illustration, it may not happen at exactly the same time in every part of Scotland. I mean, some people have argued that we should perhaps look at doing things on a different time scale on the islands, for example. Now, I'm not saying we will, but it is not impossible that at some stage the evidence might point in that direction. And I come back to my starting point, and it's the only valid consideration as far as I'm concerned. What is the best things to do to suppress the virus and stop it infecting people, making people seriously ill and taking people's lives?
Okay, thank you. Alistair has a question for you about border control. Alistair.
Hello, First Minister. Alistair Donaldson from Brighton's in Falkirk. As a means of further controlling the effects of COVID-19, would it not make sense to close and/or control our borders and to introduce scanning of individuals at all entry points, land, sea and air? Currently, travellers can arrive anywhere in the UK without any form of test being carried out. I've read of 16,000 persons arriving daily into Heathrow with no tracking of their onward movement. How many could travel to Scotland, bringing who knows what with them? I appreciate that border control is not devolved, but these are rather unique times requiring perhaps more Scotland-specific action. Thank you.
Well, the issue of border control in terms of the international UK borders is not something that is within the responsibility of the Scottish Government, but I agree with you, Alistair, that I think as we go into the next phase of dealing with this virus, these issues very much have to be part of the discussion. And you know, many countries right now are asking people who come into the country to isolate for a period of 14 days. I think some countries are even talking about, you know, quarantine. And so these things, as we get to a stage where we've suppressed this virus sufficiently, start to lift restrictions a little bit, then one of the risks of the virus running out of control again, not the only one, but one of them will be people bringing the virus into the country. So I don't think you can have this discussion about how we continue to suppress it unless we have what might need to be done at the border as part of that discussion. We published, the Scottish Government published a paper a week and a half or so ago, and we raised that issue in there, and it's something that I think across the UK we will be discussing more in the days and weeks to come.
Okay, thank you, First Minister, and thank you, Alistair. Okay, I've got a bit of a hair-raising question for you now, Nicola Sturgeon.
Hi Nicola, this is Kirsty Bella from Stirling. So first of all, I think you're doing a great job. So my question is, I saw you on Facebook on one of the photos cutting your own hair. I was just wondering if you're still doing it, because I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank
Over
you.
to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your kind comment as well. I really appreciate that. I didn't just cut my own hair, thin it out more to the point. I also coloured it, which was a bit more risky. I've not done it since then, but it is kind of going to be due to be done again frighteningly soon. So I may have to get the hair dye out again and the scissors to try to do some repair work there. I'll also learn from my mistake the last time where I forgot to put the gloves on before I got my hands in the hair dye. So I was wandering around for a few days afterwards with black hands, but I'll try to remember the gloves this time.
Thank you for that, Kirsty. And on that theme, Jackie Johnston from Falkirk asks, she's a self-employed mobile hairdresser and not employed at all at the moment. She says she's been, hearing that some businesses will be able to reopen so long as they can comply with social distancing. How will that work in like a hairdressing and salon environment?
Well, for obvious reasons, that's going to be more difficult in the kind of environment of a hairdresser or a beauty salon. And that kind of illustrates the point. Not all businesses will be able to reopen or restart at exactly the same time. That there will be a phasing required here, and there will, be a lot of work that is necessary to think about the measures that can be put in place in different work environments to enable people to come back safely. And that's going to be harder in some types of business than it will be in others. And there's a lot of businesses, a lot of office work, for example. We will continue to ask people where possible to work at home, probably for quite some time to come. So this is a kind of territory we're going to be getting much more into over the next couple of weeks as we start to try to get businesses back operational in one form or another as quickly as possible. It might be that, just as for individuals, it will be easier to start up activity that happens outdoors, rural agricultural businesses, for example, earlier than businesses that are indoors. But where it's very, very difficult for people to stay 2 meters apart, these are going to be the most challenging circumstances of all.
Okay, thank you. Coming soon, we'll hear from Johnny, who works in the hospitality industry. Mike's going to ask about pubs, and also James has a question about business grants. But First Minister, you've chosen a few songs at this time that we can play for you. I think George Michael's song is the first one we're going to go for. Why is that so inspirational and important to you?
Well, I was a big Wham fan when I was much younger in the 1980s, and I loved George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley back then, but George Michael obviously went on to be a brilliant solo artist, and the song I've chosen, Faith, is one of my favourites, and I think we probably all need a bit of faith right now that things are going to get better.
Good afternoon, this is Central FM. I'm Brian Wolfson. I'm joined by First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Hello, First Minister again. Let's hear from Johnny, who works in the hospitality industry. He's looking for a bit of reassurance, really.
First Minister, we've been told that pubs, clubs and restaurants will be among the last businesses to reopen following the peak of the pandemic. The government has extended the furlough scheme until the end of June, and with Scotland alone employing over 220,000 staff in the hospitality sector, what can we expect with regards to the furlough scheme, or indeed an industry-specific scheme, since we're being told we may not be able to open again until the end of summer at the very least?
Well, it's a very good and important question, Johnny. First of all, I think in broad terms, I think your assumption is pretty much right, that pubs and restaurants may be not opening as early as some other businesses are, just because of the nature of trying to keep people apart. Although, there will be a lot of thinking, no doubt, about how these kind of places can open safely when the time is right. But the Scottish Government will be working hard with the UK Government and seeking to persuade them to keep the financial support going for as long as it is necessary, both in the shape of the furlough scheme, which allows companies not to have to make their staff redundant, but also in the shape of some of the grants and rates reliefs that we are able to implement here in Scotland. So, you know, we need to make sure that for as long as we are asking businesses to effectively not operate as normal, then there is some form of government support that is helping them with that. Now, the UK government holds a lot of these levers right now, given the split of responsibilities between the Scottish and UK governments. So we will have to work with them. And they've been very good so far in bringing forward some of these schemes, but withdrawing that support prematurely would be very damaging, and we need to avoid that.
Okay, another angle on pubs from Mike.
Hi Wolfie, hi Nicola, I'm Mike from Airth. As a pub DJ, I'm concerned I'm not going to get back to work for a while. What are the ways in which the Scottish Government are trying to open pubs and bars in the evening quicker, maybe with reduced capacity and social distancing measures?
Well, these are the kind of things that we are obviously trying to go through, talking to different sectors and businesses about what would you be able to do in order to open safely. And that will be easier for some businesses than it will be for others. The UK government's already doing a lot of work around this as well, and are looking at workplace guidance, which, you know, these things will differ depending on the nature of the business. Where it's possible to work from home, people should continue to work from home, but obviously that's not possible in the pub and restaurant trade. Now, you know, yes, things like, can you reduce the number of people you have there so that you keep people apart? All of that will be relevant, but we've also got to recognise that I think, particularly in pubs, you know, maintaining that kind of social distance is never going to be easy. So, you know, there are some businesses, and I take no delight at all in saying this because it is really, really tough. Some businesses, I think, are just going to be more of a challenge to find those safe ways of working, and we're going to be living with some of these changes for quite some time to come. But suffice to say, we all want to get the economy moving again as quickly as possible, get as many businesses operating in some way, shape or form as quickly as possible, but that has got to be done in a way that's safe for people. Because if we do things that allow the virus to get out of control again, then that's going to be even worse for businesses, because the damage will be deeper and it will be even more long lasting than it is already going to be. So these are all really difficult judgments and fine balances that we'll try to strike as best we can in full consultation with different sectors of the economy.
Okay, let's move on to James.
James Smith, the Village Inn, Dunblane. First Minister, the business grants have been a vital lifeline to small businesses over this difficult time. However, pubs, restaurants, etc. look like they'll be the last to open, probably with restrictions in place. Will a further grant become available to make sure these businesses don't go into administration? There's also businesses who have stayed open and got the grant when it's not needed. Will there be an investigation afterwards to recoup this money for those who have selfishly gained through this?
Well, on the latter part of your question, businesses shouldn't be accessing the financial support unless they need it and are eligible for it, and there are checks in place around eligibility, but I can't sit here and say no business has got it when they shouldn't have. But I would ask all businesses to make sure that they're not accessing money that they're not entitled to, because that takes it away from somebody else who perhaps is. In terms of the first part of your question, I would point back to an answer I gave a few minutes ago, that as long as we're asking businesses not to operate in a normal way, I think it's incumbent on government to continue financial support. Now, the UK government have brought forward very positive schemes that's delivered some money for Scotland. They continue to hold many of the levers around this, so we'll continue to persuade them to continue that support for as long as possible, which we're also keen to do and anxious that we do in areas that are the responsibility of the Scottish Government.
Okay, Nicola Sturgeon, earlier on you mentioned the plans to set up a test, track and trace scheme. How user-friendly will the system be to use, especially for those who maybe aren't very good with technology? I know you're a bit of a technology whiz on Twitter and all sorts of social media, but just, you know, maybe for older people as well who don't have those skills.
Well, the system we're building, which is not a brand new system, it will be at a much bigger scale given the nature and the scale of coronavirus. But, you know, public health teams in every health board area will already have the ability to do testing, contact tracing for other diseases. You know, Ebola, thankfully we didn't see much of that, but they would have it for that. For some other illnesses, then they will have that ability already. So it's not a completely new thing, but what we have to do is scale it up considerably. Technology will have a part to play in this, but we're not building our systems purely on the basis of technology. Effectively, when somebody has symptoms and gets a test, and then they will have to share who they've been in contact with, in the first instance, it will be people, contact tracers, who are taking details of the contacts, then following them up and giving the appropriate advice. It will try to automate it as much as possible because it makes it simpler. And you might also have heard of an app that's being talked about, which is being developed by the UK government. And that might be a useful enhancement, but we're not building our whole system around it, because that will be an app that you download, and then if you tell it you've got symptoms, it would automatically alert anybody you've been in contact with, assuming they'd also downloaded the app. Now, as I say, I think that could be a useful addition to the system. It might make parts of it easier, but we know with technology like that, it's really important that people have confidence in it, that they are assured about the privacy, that they know what is done with the data. So I think we've got to be a bit cautious about putting all of our eggs in that basket, and instead building a system from the bottom up that technology then hopefully helps to work better over time.
Okay, I'm going to get you to choose another of your inspirational songs, Ariana Grande, and a song which means quite a bit to you, I believe.
Well, it means less to me than it does to my niece, and my niece obviously means a lot to me, so I've chosen Ariana Grande. I can't even remember the name of the song, actually. Off the top
I think
of
it's
my
One
head.
Last Time.
One Last Time, that's
One
it.
Last Time.
She'll never forgive me given that. Harriet, my niece, who will soon be 14, is a big Ariana Grande fan, and I know she'll love to hear this. And I'm missing her just now because it's a wee while now since I've seen it.
And Wolfie here on Central FM across the Forth Valley, and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon, I have Dion here with a question on behalf of new mums and also pandemic mums, so to speak. She's raising the point too about the potential bubble of contacts that we might be looking at. Dion.
Hi Nicola. Now, I know for a lot of us mums-to-be and new mums, the last thing on our mind is large gatherings at the minute. And the last few months have been a real mental and physical struggle without, the help and support that we would normally just take for granted. And I know for myself, as a first-time mum, I'm very anxious about the thought of not being able to just have my mum around to give us help if we need it. I'm just wondering, how likely is it that we will be able to be around even just one or two people in the near future?
So, well, firstly, can I say, my heart goes out to you and people in your position, because, having a baby is, the most kind of happy, exciting time of your life. And to have it in these circumstances when you're not able to get the support you need, but also share that with the people nearest and dearest to you, must just be really, really horrible. So I can absolutely sympathise with what you're going through. This idea of being able to, effectively, we're all being asked to live within our household bubbles right now, so not see people outside our own household. And what's been suggested, as some other countries have been looking at this too, is could you extend that bubble to include people in your wider family, maybe, but not in your own household? And we're looking at these things very closely just now. And it would have a lot of conditions attached to it. You would continue to have to do social distancing. They would have to make sure they weren't seeing lots of people outside that. If any of you got ill, you would have to isolate. So it's quite difficult in a practical sense to work out how it operates and how breaches of it might be enforced. It also may be the case, one of the things that we are learning about this virus is not that it can't transmit in the open air, it definitely can, but outdoor activity may be less risky than indoor activity. So it's the kind of thing that conceivably, and I'm not making any hard and fast announcements here, conceivably we might try something like that based on outdoor contact before we would do it indoors. You're in a particularly difficult situation, but I think all of us are really feeling not being able to have contact with our families outside our own households. So the sooner we can get that normality back to some degree, the better. I mean, there's a lot of talk about getting businesses back, what the questions have been about that, and that's really important. But for a lot of us, it's actually the social interaction, actually being able to see in the flesh the people that you love most. That's what is most important to us. So I can't give you definitive answers about timescales or exactly how that will work, but to reassure you, we are looking closely at all of these things. Can we do these things while not risking the virus running out of control again? And as I say, these are really fine, difficult balances, but we have to try and strike them as best we can.
Okay, a couple more questions. I'm sure you'll answer this one honestly, First Minister. If you were stuck on a deserted island, okay, and you could only bring one of the following people with you, you have to think carefully about this. Who would it be? Janie Godley, Dr. Gregor Smith, or Boris Johnson?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think Boris and I would probably agree that that wasn't the best thing to do. And I mean that. It's great to see him back to health and, with his new baby and everything. So I don't mean that in a personal sense, but probably politically. We'd end up having political arguments even if we were trying not to because of coronavirus. Gregor, I'm spending a lot of time with already. He's a great guy. He's a great chief medical officer, but probably we would benefit from, not being trapped on a desert island together. Janie, I mean, sometimes I watch Janie Godley's voiceovers and think she lives inside my head anyway, so we should just cut to the chase. And I'll say Janie Godley. And
you regularly watch the videos that Janie does?
I do watch some of them sometimes,
yeah. Okay.
And I'm sure I'd love to regret it. Maybe I could start doing voiceovers of her if we shared the desert.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. Nicola, you're turning 50 this summer. I'm guessing the party's delayed for now.
Deal with right now.
It's just an early happy birthday. The party is going to be delayed. Evie wants your help though.
Hi, it's Evie Harley from Falkirk here. Nicola, I'm just wondering if it's possible for those of us that are turning 50 this year, if we can postpone and legally stay 49 and just turn 50 next year.
Evie, that is the best idea I've ever heard. So consider it done. I'm going to introduce emergency legislation that will allow you and I and everybody born in 1970 to stay 49 for an extra year.
Okay, final question from us here at Central FM this afternoon. First Minister, once the crisis is finally over, we obviously don't know how long that's going to be. Clearly one of the most draining things you've ever had to oversee. Can I just ask that quickly before I ask my last question? Would you say it is the most draining thing you've ever had to oversee?
Without a shadow of a doubt. When I was Health Secretary, 10 years or so ago, I dealt with the swine flu pandemic. So I got a little insight then, but that, of course, not that it wasn't serious, but it was nothing like this. I've never dealt with anything as big, all-consuming, and as serious as this. So without a shadow of a doubt, you're right to say that.
So in view of that, are you planning to stay on as Scotland's First Minister afterwards, or are you going to take a break?
I have no plans to take a break from being First Minister for the foreseeable future, but of course there's an election next May, about a year from now. So as always with any politician, your future is in the hands of the electorate. But as I've always said, to be serious, as long as I feel that I'm the best person for the job and I'm able to do that job to the best of my ability, and also obviously as long as the people of Scotland want me to continue to do it, then at the moment I'm keen to continue to do it. But equally, I'm not really thinking much at the moment beyond just dealing with this virus and trying to get it under control.
Okay, so one last song that you're going to choose, and Florence and the Machine, the artist. Why does this one mean something to you?
Because it's quite an upbeat song, and I think everybody needs a bit of a kind of just lift at the moment. So Feel the Love, I think, is... and, one of the things about this virus, it's horrible, it's grim, it's having such a terrible impact on all of our lives, but particularly, on people who've lost loved ones through it. But I think it's also reminding us of some of the things that really matter in life, our friends and our family, solidarity with each other, looking out for each other, and love. And so this is probably quite a good song to end on.
Well, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, thank you so much for joining us on Central FM this afternoon.
Thank you.